God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the I Don't Belong Here show, and I am your host, Samantha Benigno. I am a behavioral scientist, a career psychotherapist, a sixth-year PhD candidate in clinical psychology, a master's level psychologist and counselor, and I am here breaking down the Justice for John O'Keefe case. So, as most of you probably know or have probably seen, or at least seen clips of, ABC has elected to profile some of the Karen Read case. And they kind of immediately after the verdict responded with that absurd interview with the Albert and McCabe clan.
Hold on. Have each of you been called murderers? Like actual murderers?
Oh, yeah, on a daily basis.
Whether it's phone calls, text messages, emails, crazy Unabomber type letters to people's houses.
That included Matt, Jen, Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Chris Albert, though God only knows why Chris Albert was there. I mean, assuming that Colin had nothing to do with it, that is, because Chris really wasn't involved in that night. And so what the hell is he doing there if he's not there in defense of his son, Colin? Then, within hours, they started to profile their 2020 special that featured an interview with former lead investigator on the case, Michael Proctor.
Now, Justin, a verdict for Karen Read.
The defendant at bar guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
This is the case the whole country couldn't stop watching. I hit him.
I hit him. I hit him.
I said it with a question mark.
It's like that my cousin Vinny moment. I shot the clerk versus I shot the clerk.
You'll see that this case carries him cancer. His name is Michael Proctor.
And all new, and you're the first person from inside the investigation to speak out. The exclusive interview with the controversial trooper in the bullseye.
That's tough.
And at the same time, or within the days that would follow, we would hear from many of the jurors, including the foreman and juror number 11, Paula. And interestingly, what they almost all pointed to in this case as the reason for their acquittal was the shoddy police work, was the work of Michael Proctor, was the text messages by Michael Proctor, and the very clear and overwhelming confirmation bias that was evidenced by Michael Proctor's text messages, but not only by Michael Proctor's text messages, because as juror number 11 pointed out, it was the testimony of Yuri Buchanan that started to sway the tides for her.
Would you agree with me that Michael Proctor was the lead investigator as well as the case agent in charge of this case?
He was assigned as the case officer for the case.
In that position, given the fact that it was his assignment, would you agree with me that he had a leadership role insofar as the investigation of the case is concerned?
I wouldn't call it a leadership role. It's more of a facilitator, liaison between the DA's personnel within the office and the state police.
You'll see the moment where he realizes it and he's like, "You're not really going to deny this, are you?"
I wouldn't call it a leadership role. It's more of a facilitator, liaison between the DA's personnel within the office.
Every case has some lead trooper in your unit, correct? Every case is assigned to someone to sort of be in charge and lead the charge of the investigation. Is that right?
Every case has a case officer that manages the investigation. Wait for me, I couldn't hear you.
Every team, including back in the time you were in the military, back in the time you were in the Marine Corps, every team has multiple individuals involved in that team, correct? That's the whole point of a team, multiple people, correct?
I would agree with you that a team consists of more than one person.
And it has to be some sort of echelon of leadership on that team, correct? Everybody's not just an equal, co-equal, correct?
We might have different duties, responsibilities, but some teams have equal rank. Yeah.
But there's
No, they actually don't. Now, I don't know. I've never been in the Marines or the Army or the military, but from what I understand, even if you had a group of guys that were going out with the same rank, they're on a mission. Certainly, somebody is going to be assigned as the leader for that mission. And by the way, if I'm on the jury, how do you think this looks? If you're on the jury, how do you think it looks that this guy is doing everything he can to refuse to admit that Michael Proctor's fingerprints are all over this case? And of course, it's going to come back to haunt him because Michael Proctor's fingerprints are all over this case.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
maybe. You obviously, as a supervisor, want to make sure, you talked about following the evidence, you want to make sure that that evidence is gathered in a way that is adequate, in a way that is objective, that in a way that is unbiased, so that you can gather the evidence that will lead you to the right folks, right? The right suspects.
We always want to gather as much evidence as possible. We conduct that gathering in the most appropriate ways possible. Sometimes there are tough decisions that have to be made where we have to either decide whether we're collecting evidence A or evidence B, and those decisions have to be made on the spot. At times it's a time-sensitive matter. At times it's a decision made by a group putting their heads together and deciding on that. So
he's not answering the question at all.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
not really.
That's the most
Let's try it again.
Accurate explanation.
Okay. You done?
Mm-hmm.
I am.
Okay. Let's try that again.
So ABC makes the calculated decision to immediately come out in defense of these people and to present a case in opposition to the 18 jurors in this case who would have all voted for an acquittal. And it's interesting to me that they would make this choice. Now, it's not surprising because all along, if you think back to even a few months ago, they were featuring Carrie Roberts and all of the friends and family of John who are talking about how Karen Reed is guilty.
And this morning, one of the trial's key witnesses, Carrie Roberts, John O'Keefe's lifelong friend, speaking to the media for the first time, exclusively to GMA.
You're obviously one of the key witnesses for the entire case. Why are you speaking out now on the eve of Karen's second trial?
I think people have forgotten John in general. He is the victim. He's lost his life. He's not coming back.
Roberts took the stand yesterday and will continue testifying today. She is a critical witness for the prosecution because she was the first person Karen Reed called at 5 a.m. the morning of the blizzard trying to find John.
You will agree, at least for that purpose, you painted a very, very detailed picture in front of the grand jury, didn't you?
Yeah.
Except it's not true, is it?
I did not hear her ask that. I was told she was asked that.
The answer to my question, Ms. Roberts, and I'm not a trick question, what you told the grand jurors was not true. You never heard her, my client, ask anyone to Google anything, did you?
I did not. Frantic. I mean, she knew John was missing, so she was frantic about it, as I would be.
If you watched this 2020 presentation, this absolute sham of a program, you would see just how biased ABC actually is. And I will tell you, just so you understand clearly where I am coming from, I am not somebody who believed that legacy media cannot be trusted. I was the one defending legacy media. That changes right here and right now. The way in which ABC cherry-picked their coverage to try and minimize the evidence in this case is such an outrage. Everyone, whether you give a crap about the Karen Reed case or not, should be outraged. And Matt Murphy, a guy who, I trusted, a California guy, former prosecutor, I had no way to know how biased his coverage, his so-called legal analysis was until now. The way that they cherry-picked the evidence in this case to make it favorable for the Commonwealth is criminal, misleading the general public. A total disgrace, a sham, a mockery. Matt Murphy of the prosecutor's office, you have just validated, you have just given them more ammunition to keep going, to keep their shameful, disgraceful behavior going.
First statement of its kind in my dozen years as Norfolk District Attorney. The harassment of witnesses in the murder prosecution of Karen Reed is absolutely baseless. It should be an outrage to any decent person, and it needs to stop. A grand jury of everyday citizens heard the documented evidence and testimony before making a decision. I'm asking the Canton community and everyone who feels invested in this case to hear all the actual evidence at trial before assigning guilt to people who have done nothing wrong. Testimony from witnesses tell us that 18-year-old Colin Albert had left his uncle's home before John O'Keefe and Karen Reed had arrived outside the residence. There was no fight inside that home. John O'Keefe did not enter the home. Colin Albert, the young man being vilified, was not present when Reed's vehicle and John O'Keefe arrived on the street. This is a false narrative. Colin Albert didn't commit murder. Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, and Brian Albert. These people were not part of a conspiracy and certainly did not commit murder or any crime that night.
Did you look, Matt Murphy? Did you look at the evidence of whether or not they planted evidence, or did you just take his word for it because he's a cop?
Plant evidence.
Absolutely not. And I'm laughing because it's such a ridiculous accusation. It's something I would never do. I've never done.
You know, most people would.
And there's no evidence of it.
We're talking about people in your community, your neighbors, who believe it. This is not strangers. This is people in Canton. Why do you think that is?
That's just the loud minority.
Now, Proctor tells me he did know Brian Albert's brother, Chris, and wife, Julie, who'd been at the Waterfall Bar. But you knew Julie and Chris Albert.
Yes, through a distant relationship with my sister.
Did you know Jen McCabe?
No.
And the McCabes? No.
No. Never met the McKays before, prior to this investigation.
Did you ever think at any point that you should recuse yourself from this case?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Wasn't too close to home, both figuratively and literally?
No. It wasn't a concern of mine. It wasn't a concern of DA Michael Morrissey. It wasn't a concern of my supervisors. You know, I didn't know these people. There was loose connections with Julie and Chris.
Why wasn't Karen's tail light found at the scene right away? And the fact that there were even additional pieces of evidence found days, even weeks later? Very early on, Alan Jackson told me that he could not understand why it was that every time that you went back to the scene, new evidence would materialize. He found that very suspicious.
Maybe you didn't read the weather report I provided in my reports.
Which indicated?
Over the next week to 2 weeks, temperatures range from 30 to 60 degrees with heavy rain, snow melts at a rapid pace, and the more snow that melted, the more evidence unearthed itself.
Did you take more than 30 seconds to look at his text messages? And the standard line by all these people, including the O'Keefe family.
As far as, Michael Proctor's comments, I mean, he even said, too, they were unprofessional, which we agree with. But, this guy, his life's been ruined, Getting his personal cell phone, which was something that should never have happened. Josh Levy should never have been intervened in this. An FBI investigation was launched due to cherry-picked evidence that was, or pieces of discovery that was only provided by the defense. Like, this is
pretty unprecedented.
To not even speak to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, to not speak to the Mass Police to see what they have for discovery and evidence. Just to intervene himself in that way, and which casted, a shadow of doubt on the investigation.
In defense of this piece of garbage investigator who wants to get his job back, who thinks he deserves to have a job, is that these were personal texts that they shouldn't have been allowed in court anyway. But do you know why they were? They show us how this man was thinking and feeling about the evidence. He totally and completely went against his oath as a police officer to follow the evidence wherever it led. He made up his mind by 1 o'clock in the afternoon and decided he was going to go without a search warrant and confiscate Karen Reed's vehicle and her cell phone. And you know what, Matt Murphy? Do you know that none of the investigators in this case ever took videos, ever took photos? Do you know there was no photos of Karen Reed's taillight taken that day? Because if you were an honest cop and really believed that there was an accident, wouldn't you want to take photos to memorialize the car right away? As soon as you got possession, would you not be taking photos? And do you know that at no time ever thereafter were photos ever taken?
This is the afternoon of January 29th, 2022, correct?
Correct.
Before the vehicle had been seized formally by Trooper Proctor and Sergeant Buchanan, correct?
Correct. There was, it was damaged, the taillight was damaged, but there was a crack missing, but it was not completely damaged. A piece was missing.
I told him that, when I arrived and I saw the vehicle in the driveway, there was a crack missing and a piece was missing, but it was not completely damaged, like I testified. And the crazy thing is the Commonwealth kept saying, you sure that was what you saw? So this is like my trial prep. Because I was going to be going in the next coming week. So they had asked, I don't know who specifically was the one that was talking, but they had said, there's a picture that, the taillight is completely damaged. And I had told them that's not what I saw.
The piece was about maybe this big.
Sergeant Barrows, is this the condition of the right rear taillight when you showed up at the Reed household at around 3:15 in the afternoon on January 29th, 2022?
Absolutely not.
And did you know, Matt Murphy, that evidence just revealed itself, that the taillight just kept revealing itself in the month to follow? Did you know that the chief of the police in Canton was best friends with the guy that we're all pretty sure, those of us that have paid very close attention and have given up hours of our lives, which you obviously didn't, to follow this case, did you know that was his very best friend? And did you know that at that man's retirement party, Brian Higgins got up and said, if you wanted to hide a body, Chief Berkowitz is the guy that'll help you do it. Did you know that? Did you know that Brian Albert is known as a very scary guy? That even Chief Berkowitz was scared of Brian Albert? Did you know that? Did you know that Brian Higgins told the feds that? And gee, I wonder why Brian Higgins would have a motive to tell the feds to look at Brian Albert. You think it might have been to get everybody's eyes off of him? Did you look, Matt Murphy, at the evidence in the Waterfall bar 20 minutes before John O'Keefe's phone stops everything? John O'Keefe's phone stops, that all engagement on that phone completely ceases forever. Did you know that Brian Higgins is seen in a bar pointing at John, heated, angry, sending him text messages minutes before his death saying, "Are you coming here?" Did you know that? Did you take the time to investigate the butt dials, Matt Murphy? Did you take the time to investigate how it's possible that a German Shepherd was sleeping outside the windows at 6 a.m. when an entire army of first responders and Karen Reed, screaming, yelling, and hysterical, is outside of those windows, and that dog doesn't make a peep? Did you know that? So in their genius, ABC focuses on the evidence put forth by Shannon Burgess, an utterly discredited, disgraceful human being that they conveniently decide not to mention. And by the way, this garbage evidence is the evidence that the O'Keefe family points to say, yep, 100% Karen Reed killed him. 100%. This is what they point to. Did you know that? So just coincidentally, that's what ABC chose to cherry pick to say, here it is. This is the definitive evidence put forth by two of the most pay-to-play witnesses the world has ever seen, and Shannon Burgess and Judd Welcher. Did you show the little play with paint test by Judd Welcher? Oh, no. That's so funny. They left that out. I wonder why.
The first test you're going to see is me just walking backwards, or actually sideways, into the Lexus. What I've done is I've painted the Lexus right rear tail light with what's called grease paint. Kind of sort of like paint, but it doesn't dry. And then I have backed up sideways, side shuffled into the Lexus with my arm out to see what the damage pattern looks like.
Okay, I just want to point out that this man just fell into the Lexus, okay? The Lexus did not drive backwards into him, okay? Do you want to see that little move again? Let's see that little move again, shall we?
With my arm out, see what the damage pattern looks like.
That really happened. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a real scientist actually testifying in a court of law. That is what this is. This is the Commonwealth's case right here. Just when you thought it couldn't possibly get any worse for the Commonwealth, they introduced their rock star accident reconstructionist, Dr. Judd Welcher.
Question: when you're engaging in these demonstrations, are you attempting to try to show exactly how Mr. O'Keefe was struck?
No. So we don't know exactly how he was.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait. I'm sorry. Was that the sound of the Commonwealth's expert accident reconstructionist just telling you that they don't know how John O'Keefe got his injuries? That is the definition of reasonable doubt. Did you mention the fact that these guys changed their reports in the middle of the trial, right after Ian Whiffin's testimony, so that their reports, their information, their data now matches Ian Whiffin's? Did you mention that? Nope, left that out. How about the fact that this credible infotainment and telematics data tells us no accident? Nope, no accident.
What did you find in terms of, I want to narrow this question to January 29th, 2022. What did you find in terms of any data regarding a collision?
Neither of the events that occurred on that date were triggered by a collision.
Thank you.
According to them, Karen Reed backed the car up. That's the evidence. She backed up the car. That's the evidence that Matt Murphy is saying makes Karen Read guilty of killing John O'Keefe. But you know what they leave out? In addition to how unbelievably not credible these two men are, not just not credible on their face, just totally not credible. And Matt Gutman, I've got terrible news for you, buddy. Terrible, very, very scary news for you. As you sit here and you pretend to treat these people like normal human beings, you're sitting in a room of criminals who are responsible for the murder and cover-up of a police officer. And that isn't cherry-picked, because I have sat with the evidence for a year, actually over a year in April. I have taken years off my life, probably because of the stress of this case, but more than that, sat for hours laboring over their testimonies, and going out in the world and trying to figure out who is telling the truth. Where is there actual evidence? Like, let's just take the most obvious for examples, because let's see, it stands out. Let's just take Colin Albert, who has the audacity in front of a judge on the record to state over and over again he's never been in a fight and has no proclivities towards violence.
Oh, fucking please, before I hit the shit, before I run your shit, before I fucking chug a beer and hit that shit.
Karen Read's lawyers have been aggressively cross-examining prosecution witness Colin Albert, the nephew of the owner of the Canton property where John O'Keefe was found in January of 2022. Albert is seen in a photo which was taken less than a month after the incident in Canton when O'Keefe died. His knuckles on his right hand are bruised. Now, yesterday, Colin Albert testified that he was at the house on the night in question, but never saw John O'Keefe. Also, on cross-examination this morning, Colin Albert told the jury that he has known the lead state police investigator in this case, Trooper Michael Proctor, since he was a child.
Why did his mother offer Proctor a thank you gift?
That's right. And you solemnly swear the evidence here, the court and jury in the case now and here to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. You indicated on cross-examination you've never been in a fight.
No.
Indicating that you have no violent tendencies and no violent proclivities, correct?
Nope.
You stand by that testimony?
Correct.
Yo, you're Benton's boys. I will beat all your asses. I promise you, I will fuck you all up. Pull up, bitch. You're a bitch, bro. Fuck you. Yeah, fuck you, pussy. Big cold, boy, you be knocked out. KO. Bang, bang.
That I would beat them up.
Did you say you would beat them up, or did you say, I will fuck you up?
I said I will F you up.
No, you didn't say, I will F you up. What did you actually say?
That I would fuck them up.
You also said something about beating somebody's ass, right?
Correct.
What did that mean?
That I would beat them up.
So when you said, I will fuck you up and I will beat your ass, was that a friendly invitation?
No.
That was a threat, correct?
I don't know if I would call it a threat. I'm not sure.
Someone walks up to you. I'm not going to do it. But if someone did, walked up to you and said, I will fuck you up. I will beat your ass. You wouldn't take that as a threat?
If they walked up to me, yeah.
But if they didn't walk up and just shouted it across the street and stood there and said, I will fuck you up, I will beat your ass, that's not a threat.
I'm not sure.
Objecting. Were you threatening these Advantage Boys guys, whoever they are?
Yeah, kinda.
Were you threatening them with violence?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah. In the second video, you said, fuck you a number of times. And then you said, KO, you said, pull up, KO, bang, bang. Right?
Correct.
Explain that to me.
Not sure, like, explain what I said.
Is that a threat?
Yeah.
Pull up, bitch. Right?
Yeah.
Who are you talking to?
Those same advantage kids.
Got it. So you're threatening him yet again a second time.
Yeah.
What does pull up mean?
Like, come by.
Yeah, meaning get over here. Right?
Yep.
Because when you do, I'm going to fuck you up. Right?
Yeah.
Meaning I'm going to fight you and I'm going to put you down. Correct?
Correct.
That was your threat to them.
Correct.
Do you think that Matt Murphy is aware of that? Blatant, outright, disgraceful perjury? Do you think he is? Or how about the Commonwealth's unabashful efforts to do everything that they can to keep evidence away from the jurors? How about the fact that there's even people going on the record to say that they have heard that the foreperson on the last jury was colluding with the prosecutors? Peter met with Adam Lally for lunch. During this lunch, Adam Lally told Peter that he knows the foreperson. Oh my God. This is not good. Now, I can't say whether that's true, but is this the group that you would want to hang your hat on? Publicly, ABC? This is who you want to come out in support of? Why? Because they're cops? This was a bad call. A disgraceful call. And all you're doing is, unfortunately, torturing the O'Keefe family, who is in utter denial of the evidence.
Carrie and Johns were friends since childhood. So was Brendan Kane.
He was a diehard South Sox, Bruins, Pats fan. Name it, Boston sports. He was obsessed.
My biggest concern about the second trial is how do you field a objective 12-person panel? Are we going to be able to get a fair shake?
And there are these billboards urging locals to remember John, which can be seen across the Boston area.
The goal was to ensure that the public sentiment, that folks understood what void was created from Johnny's murder. It's not just about the defendant. It should be about the victim.
Because like the 18 jurors who sat, who looked and labored for over a month of their life, every single day, at every single bit of evidence, at everybody's statements in this case, and that didn't even include the homeowners, came to the decision that Karen Reed couldn't have done this. Not didn't, couldn't have. Do you know why, Matt Murphy? Do you know why, Matt Gutman, who sat in a room full of murderers and validated their book? Because there was no car accident.
The debris that comes off of the taillight, the fragments, what speed would they be going at the point of impact when they crack and are released from the taillight?
At the impact speed or less.
In order to penetrate the sweatshirt and cut the arm across, would the shards have to be going faster or slower than the arm?
They would have to be going faster. If they're moving at a common velocity with the arm relative to it, they would somehow have to accelerate with more speed to catch up and go beyond the arm, essentially.
Is that physically possible?
No. You can see here again also the light and the fragments are being propelled forward. So you also have to consider where Mr. O'Keefe was found. He was found in the yard about 10 or 20 feet from the road. There was no exact measurements. But if you look at the motion of the taillight, it's going forward. Now, if Mr. O'Keefe has to move diagonally to the top left of that corner, and if he's not hit with the center of mass, he can't get to where he ends up before the taillight fragments have already gone forward and been deposited on the ground. Average running speed is like 4 to 6 miles an hour. Even if this SUV is going 10 miles an hour, it shatters, the lights fracture, they're dispersed on the ground, and then Mr. O'Keefe somehow ends up to his point of rest. But you wouldn't find the fragments on him because they've already been pushed forward, come to rest, before he even has a chance to get to where they find him.
But this is how 2020 tried to frame ARCA.
Then the defense's most important witness, Andrew Rentschler, is a biomechanical engineer, and his company conducted a series of tests. And based on these tests, Rentschler offers a different opinion as to whether John O'Keefe was even struck by a vehicle at all.
I did, yes.
And what is that opinion?
My opinion is that the evidence is inconsistent with Mr. O'Keefe being struck on the right arm by the SUV.
Things get testy during cross-examination.
When you looked at all the tests you did, the plastic broke differently in each and every case, every experiment, didn't it?
Sure, it's broken like that, and I've never seen a case where you get these types of abrasions.
I didn't ask you that. Is that funny?
It's not funny.
Okay.
So I'm going to strike the comment. Next question.
Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan also suggests that Rentschler is cozy with the defense.
Did you create heavy bias for you?
Any bias?
Bias, yes.
What do you mean, did I have any bias?
Well, after you testified, where did you go?
Well, I was waiting for my ride, and to get back to the airport, they had to take other people, and so they were having a lunch afterwards, and they said, come have a sandwich, and then your ride will take you to the airport. So I went, and I had a ham sandwich.
How long were you at the table eating your ham sandwich with the folks there enjoying the event? How long do you think that went on for?
I honestly don't know. 10 minutes? How long does it take you to eat a ham sandwich? 10 minutes?
They leave out that ARCA wasn't hired by the defense originally. They were hired by the feds, a completely neutral party that they didn't know Karen Reed or the defense team, and that they didn't know the Commonwealth, and that they were hired by an outside agency. Do you know why they were hired, Matt Murphy? With your arrogant, smug face, sits and lies to the American people, suggesting that ARCA was biased because he ate a ham sandwich for 10 minutes after he testified during the first trial. But they leave out that the feds hired ARCA for one reason. To tell them whether a car hit this man. That's why they were hired. Two of the world's most credible engineers and scientists, one who focused entirely on the damage to the vehicle, the other who focused entirely on the damage to John O'Keefe, both came away with absolute certainty saying it didn't happen. It's impossible. The evidence at the scene did not match this man's injuries. And so, of course, even though they made that information available equally to the Commonwealth and to the defense team in this case, guess what? Commonwealth didn't think that made a difference. Of course, Michael Morrissey didn't think that mattered. Oh, and by the way, do you know how much ARCA was paid for? Do you know how much the defense paid ARCA? These two are salaried employees. Salaried. Yeah. And we even have evidence of prosecutor Hank Brennan telling the judge, there's nothing to see here.
PM the night before I testified, yes.
So it's before you testified?
Yes.
Okay. Let me show you this document. Do you recognize that one?
Yes.
What's that?
That is the attachment to the email.
You recognize reading that?
Yes.
Do you recognize discussing the case before you testified on June 24, 2024?
I never discussed this with him. This is something that I sent to him, that I did on my own, and that I sent to him. But he never asked this of me, and we never discussed it.
So you sent him what you thought would be the best questions and answers for him to ask you when you testified?
So this is something I routinely do when I work with attorneys, okay? I prepare this on my own to prep myself and prepare for trial.
That he was wrong in believing that there was collusion happening between the defense and ARCA. Because this is the kind of signaling that the prosecutor's office was doing throughout the trial with the so-called judge. And isn't it interesting that there's not a word by ABC, not a word, not a peep about how corrupt and biased the judge in this case was?
They filed motion after motion after motion. And well, that's one thing. I mean, I can handle a prosecutor. I can beat most prosecutors with my hands tied behind my back. I know evidence very, very, very well. The problem is when the judge is on the Commonwealth side and tends to lean toward the Commonwealth, that makes life very difficult. And I've got example after example after example of the judge Cannoni making very bizarre rulings that just did benefit the Commonwealth over the defense. And they're myriad. There was a witness I took, Howie, this is still just shocking to me. There was a witness that I took on direct examination. It's direct. And it's an expert. And just allowed to lead experts in every state in the union. You can have moments where you lead experts. Every question I asked was objected to by Hank Brennan, and 100% of his objections were sustained.
Objection.
Sustained.
Correct.
Okay.
Sustained.
Is that 10%?
That is 10%.
Objection. Move to strike.
Yeah, it's sustained and it's stricken.
Objection.
Sustained. I'm going to see you sidebar for a second.
To January 29th.
Objection.
So can you narrow that, Mr. Jackson?
Sure.
I object to the whole line.
Then I need to see you at sidebar. How much longer? I'm just trying to figure out.
I'm wrapping it up, Judge.
Okay.
It's not going to be long.
I'm not curbing you in any way. We just
understand. Respectfully, it won't be very much longer.
Do you know why he gave an 8-second range? Objection.
So ask it differently, Mr.
Okay. Objection.
I'm going to allow it. Do you agree with that?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
No.
Objection.
I'm going to allow it.
Do any of the text stream events or do any of the data that you've reviewed either yourself through Mr. Burgess's report, through Dr. Welch's report, do any of the data indicate that there was a collision on January 29th, 2022 at any time?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
She needs to be in control. She needs to be the one with the power. She needs to make sure they understand she holds all the power, not them, who did everything in her power, everything a person could to keep evidence out of that courtroom, who was so disgracefully biased that Alan Jackson couldn't help himself. And the second that this trial ended, spoke up and spoke his truth. And good for you, Alan Jackson. Good for you. Because, Matt Murphy, if you spend even 3 minutes watching a second of this trial, even a second, you too wouldn't have been able to deny just how biased this judge really was. Why did you elect to show the testimony of Dr. Marie Russell, but not Dr. La Posada?
I mean, she's done the work. She has treated people who have been bitten by dogs through the years, but she's not an experienced expert witness. So when you see her on the stand, she's not the strongest of experts because she's not used to doing this.
There is no recognized standard anywhere for methodology on how to identify a dog bite wound, is there?
There is no published standard from an organization that I am aware of.
When you consider...
Brennan asked the doctor if her opinion on the case changed after she watched Reed's televised interviews. The doctor said no.
Many people suffer from what's called an acute grief reaction. It's very common. And they do things that seem to be irrational. They ramble. They act bizarrely.
Does this happen moments after a stressful event?
Oh, yes.
Does it happen months later when you go on 20/20 or Nightline?
I've never seen that situation.
No.
It gave him an opportunity to point out to the jury. So I think in that moment, Hank Brennan did a nice job of scoring some points and bringing some credibility to his side and perhaps undermining the credibility of Dr. Russell,
who just so happened to be the world's most credible chief medical examiner. Probably one of the most credible human beings to ever take the stand. Somebody who even lead prosecutor Hank Brennan had used before in his own cases. No, didn't want to mention. Do you want to mention her? Oh, okay.
Brain injuries and skull fractures due to blunt force trauma of the head.
That's how Dr. Elizabeth LaPosada says John O'Keefe ultimately died in 2022, not from being left in the snow.
No, the body did not have any hypothermia.
The former Rhode Island medical examiner was back on the stand this morning and contradicted the prosecution's theory that John O'Keefe hit his head on the ground after a collision with Karen Reed's car, testifying that the victim's head wounds were from something else.
Mr. O'Keefe went back onto some object that had some sort of ridge to it to make that horizontal tear in the skin, and also because you would not have those discrete vertical scraping of the skin. You would tend to, if you fell back on grass.
Karen Reed taking a different route into the courthouse today, bypassing her supporters before a contentious meeting with the judge without the jury present.
Those injuries on John O'Keefe's arm are from a dog. Period. Full stop. Anything less than presenting that to the jury at this point would be to perpetrate an intentional fraud on this jury.
The judge ruling that Dr. LaPosada could only suggest O'Keefe's arm injuries were from an animal, but not from a dog specifically, resulting in several sidebars throughout the morning and parts of the doctor's testimony being struck from the record.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not the wounds that you see, the patterned injury that you see on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm is consistent with an animal bite or claw marks?
Yes, it is. Very much.
Just wanted to mention Dr. Marie Russell because she was a little more shaky under cross-examination. Didn't want to show the footage of Dr. LaPosada staring Hank down and making Hank Brennan really small and pathetic. But of all the disgraceful ways that ABC presented the Karen Reed trial, maybe most egregious of all is the way that they presented Miss Kelly Devers. It was this presentation that infuriated me to the point of action.
Next up is former Canton police officer Kelly Dever, who wins the award for most hostile witness.
Miss Dever, do you want to be here tonight?
I have no relation to this case, so...
I asked you that. I asked you if you want to be here tonight.
Objection. This isn't direct.
So it's your witness.
I understand.
She can... No comments, just questions. Not. I understand that.
Dever once made statements to federal authorities about the Reed case, but later recanted, claiming it was false memory.
Sometimes you have to call a witness who you don't get along with, who you know is not for your side, because they have information that's going to help you. Prosecutors aren't going to call her, so Alan Jackson and the defense had to call her.
Do you want to be here today now?
I am put on the stand in a murder trial. I don't know why I'm here. I have no connection to this case.
You have no idea why you're here?
You've never talked to me. Nobody on the fence seems to talk to me since prior to the first trial. So I don't have any idea why I'm here.
No clue whatsoever as you sit here. Why you might be called to the stand?
No.
Whatever her value was to the defense was lost in the sea of hostility by the witness.
That's all I have.
That is the way that Kelly Devers is portrayed. And you'll notice there's not a single word about what her value was to the defense. You'll notice there's nothing about what the false statement that she claimed was. You'll notice there's nothing about the Boston police commissioner. Nothing. So if you were left just to this was your portrait of the defense's case in chief, would you be confused about how it is that 18 jurors came to acquit Karen Reed? Because according to ABC, the key witnesses in this case were Shannon Burgess and Judd Welcher. And their telematics infotainment presentation about how a car backed up. Yep, that's the evidence. By the way, you may have noticed, and this is for those who really understand this trial and know it in and out, there was no mention of Trooper Paul because the judge didn't allow it. Another very questionable decision on the part of so-called Judge Beverly Cannoni. But if you've been tracking the key cycles, you may also know that somewhere in there must be a mistake, that there's confusion around key cycle 1162 and who actually had possession of the car during that time. Because if Trooper Paul's data is correct, if he took possession of the car when he claims that he did, there's no possible way that Karen Reed was driving the car during key cycle 1162. So somebody is incorrect. Somebody's got their data wrong. Now, according to people who know infotainment data and emails that I've gotten from those people, it must be Trooper Paul who incorrectly determined when he took possession of the car, which key cycle that was. But we don't know that. And that never came into trial. So who the hell knows? With infotainment data, in order to come to that determination, they had to take bits and pieces from all of these different data sources, including John O'Keefe's cell phone, and try to line it all up. And there are potential catastrophic mistakes in there. And remember who we're relying on for this information. Shannon Burgess, who, according to him, spent 17 years trying to obtain a bachelor's degree unsuccessfully. And Judd Welcher, who was paid $400,000 to change his report in the middle of the trial so that his information aligned with Ian Whiffin's, according to when all activity in John O'Keefe's cell phone ceased. But it's interesting because according to ABC, Kelly Devers brought no value to the table. And it's the telematics data that should have sealed the deal for the jury, right? Shameful. Just shameful. And then there's the way that they keep highlighting the witness intimidation on the part of this group of people, all of whom, with the exception of Jen McCabe, didn't testify in the second trial. No need for them. So I don't know what kind of intimidation campaign would have been waged there. They weren't even necessary. Nobody even intended to bring them, to call them. Do you think Hank Brennan didn't know he wasn't going to call them like in December, a month after he was hired? Because what we learn about Hank Brennan from somebody who knows him best.
J.W. Carney Jr. has seen a lot during his time as a lawyer, including working with Brennan when both represented James Whitey Bulger more than a decade ago.
Hank is calm. He doesn't yell at people. He doesn't try to trick people. There's almost nothing he overlooks. In Whitey Bulger's case, he had file after file after file for witnesses.
The Bulger trial bringing with it a crush of media.
I'm very proud of our team.
The Reed case coming with similar interests.
I know Hank was delighted to handle this case. He had watched it a little bit, like we all did. And so Hank is coming up with ways that he will cross-examine witnesses that will really unravel their stories if they're lying.
But I care that it's unfair, imbalanced, and hidden.
Brennan's attention to detail was on display last week. Brennan using a pretrial motion hearing to call into question the use of accident reconstruction experts by Karen Reed's defense.
The Commonwealth just provided the court with information that causes me grave concern.
Leading the judge to halt the hearing. It all an example, Carney says, of Brennan's approach to this case and every case he handles.
Hank's attention to detail will be a great help to him during this trial, because he will not only have read every document and thought about every document, but responded to defense claims in a very powerful way.
And one more interesting note, you'll of course remember Karen Reed's first trial lasted some 9 weeks, prosecutors calling 68 different witnesses. Not so on the prosecution side this second time around. According to Carney, he says Brennan's style is more direct. He only calls the witnesses he needs to help explain and state his case.
Is that he only puts in front of a jury what he thinks he needs to make his case. So Hank Brennan knew he wasn't going to call Brian Albert or Brian Higgins. Absolutely no way. And why, in God's name, would he call Chris Albert this time? Because the judge and the district attorney who bent over backwards to protect Colin Albert, by his own admission, just coincidentally is the same person that the so-called judge in this case bent over backwards to keep out of the second trial. So Hank Brennan knew Colin Albert wasn't going to be involved. And of course he wasn't, because he committed perjury in the first trial. And you think they weren't aware of that? You think Hank Brennan didn't know that Colin Albert perjured himself in the first trial? It probably wasn't so smart to bring him into the second. And all along, going all the way back to the first trial, guess who sat in on every single interview in preparation for their testimony on behalf of the prosecutors?
Or 6 and 8 at the time, and get them on the bus. And then I cross the street, and their bus stops at the next house, a couple houses away. And so they could definitely see this happening. A truck pulls up as I'm trying to go into my driveway, walk up the driveway, and a guy gets out, and he's got a vest on, and he's like, "Hey," I'm like, "Can I help you?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're under arrest. We got a bunch of warrants, and put your hands." And he starts putting me in cuffs. And I'm like, "What is happening? What is going on right now? What?" And then all of a sudden, 6 other unmarked cars pull up, and one of them pops out and starts reading my rights. And it's this guy named Brian Tully. And Brian Tully is the lead, the head detective lieutenant at the State Police Norfolk County unit. And so he's like the head honcho of the Karen Reed investigation. He signs all the paperwork, et cetera. So I'm like, I've been extremely critical of this guy and accused him of being involved in the cover-up of John O'Keefe's murder. And so the guy that I'm accusing of being involved in the police cover-up of a murder is now at my house arresting me.
Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully, the same guy who did everything he could, who dug through not only Karen Reed's cell phone and banking information, but her father, her mother, her brother, friends, to try to dig up some kind of colluding between Turtle Boy, between Aidan Carney and Karen Reed. And do you know that same Brian Tully, the only person who got up and testified in front of a grand jury, failed to do so? Failed to find any evidence whatsoever linking the two of them together. That there was no wrongdoing at all between Aidan Carney and Karen Reed. And on top of that, these people have the audacity to support not only the campaign to try to put Aidan Carney in jail for 20 years for witness intimidation. What absurd garbage that is. But are giving the murderers, the people responsible for the death of John O'Keefe, a platform to defend themselves and to defend why it is the Commonwealth, despite the full acquittal by the 18 jurors who sat and listened every single day to every single piece of evidence in this case, a reason for the Commonwealth to not pursue any other suspects.
Why is it people in your own community who believe these conspiracy theories?
You do realize for this conspiracy to be true, it would take 30 to 50 people. You'd have to have multiple cops on 2 different police departments, multiple civilians, the medical examiner, firemen, EMTs, you name it. That's how preposterous and silly this is. And great question. I don't understand how people bought this.
And make no mistake about it, that's what this statement by allegedly Hank Brennan was really about. That wasn't Hank Brennan. That was Michael Morrissey's doing. And of course, Hank Brennan had no choice but to bend over for Michael Morrissey because, let's be honest, he failed utterly miserably. And to be fair to Hank Brennan, who is and will always be the world's most unlikable human being, he really wasn't given much to work with. Because Karen Read didn't do this. You have just platformed, have just highlighted, have just shamefully not only disgraced your network, but have elevated murderers, people who killed John O'Keefe, and once again purported in utter disgraceful and shameful lie that all these people in pink have forgotten John O'Keefe. So if you are watching this right now, please do me a favor. Spread the word. Because what these people are doing, it's criminal. It's a disgrace. And it spits in the face of those 18 jurors who sat and gave up their lives, who went through the evidence day after day, bit by bit, some of whom walked into that jury deliberation room believing that Karen Read did this, and at the end of the day were unable to look themselves in the mirror and say she was guilty. And you, Commonwealth, have nobody to blame for that but yourself. You, Michael Proctor, have nobody to blame for that but yourself. You, Yuri Buchanan, have nobody to blame for that but yourself. And you, Brian Tully, Michael Morrissey, Hank Brennan, Adam Lally, you are a disgrace. Shame on you. And shame on you, ABC, for highlighting this garbage. You ought to be ashamed. How dare you? How dare you keep your viewers ignorant and uninformed? How dare you not highlight for them why all of these people in pink are so supportive of not only Karen Read, but of getting and seeing justice for police officer John O'Keefe? How dare you? So please, do me a favor. Spread the word and help me to demand that a real investigation take place. Let's get Michael Morrissey out of office. Let's get somebody in there who will make it their life's mission to find out what really happened on January 28th and January 29th of 2022, so that finally, once and for all, justice can be sought for police officer John O'Keefe.
God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything.